I was 15 years old when this story happened. I'm deaf, but I can speak and sign. Growing up, there was a house next to my aunt's, an old abandoned house with 2 floors and a basement. The wire fence surrounding it was torn, but my cousin and I loved to explore because my aunt owned a large piece of land that extended to the edge of the woods. One day, my cousin and I decided to check out the old house since there was no back door. We entered the living room. It was filled with old furniture and such. It was clear that someone had left abruptly without taking anything with them. My 12-year-old cousin suddenly felt afraid because of the dark. But me? I was determined to explore further. We cautiously made our way up the stairs, testing each step with a large, heavy rock to ensure safety. When we reached the top, the hallway was empty. There were 3 rooms up there and a bathroom. I decided to check out the closest room while holding my cousin's hand. This first room was clean, almost untouched, with a window free of dust. It felt like a new house up here. Moving on to the second room, we found it dirty, rotting walls, and a bed covered in leaves and dark brown stains. The bed frame was falling apart. We moved on. Standing in the doorway of the third room, I felt uneasy, as if someone was watching us. I had the urge to vomit. My cousin noticed a rotting smell that hadn't been there before. Instinctively, I turned around to see a black, transparent figure in a wheelchair in the first clean room, staring at me. My cousin froze as I signed to him that someone was watching us from the end of the hall. Then, a voice popped in my head. Under the cross. Horrified, I grabbed my cousin and ran out. As we crossed the wire fence, we found a fresh-looking cross on the ground in front of the back entrance. My cousin, who's very germophobic, made us wear gloves whenever we explored. I was thankful for his precaution as it gave me the confidence to gently pick up the cross. I was confused about what the voice meant though, under the cross. So I placed the cross back where we found it and returned to my aunt's porch. There, we explained to our family the situation. My uncle decided to investigate. He found a cardboard box buried where the cross was. Inside the box, there was a deceased cat wrapped in a beautiful pink blanket, which I recognized as part of the bed set from upstairs in that old house. The box also contained a note and plastic flowers. My uncle, a kind man, cleaned out a wooden box from the shed and placed the cat and the other items inside it, ensuring the cat would be comfortable in the afterlife. He read the note, discovering the cat's name was Snow, a 16-year-old cat with white fur. My uncle buried Snow and used a special tool to carve the cat's name on the cross. After questioning his neighbor, my uncle learned that Snow had hung around the abandoned house ever since it was abandoned. Despite the house being heavily monitored 24/7 by my uncle and patrol cars, no one had buried the cat. The cross had seemingly appeared out of thin air. To this day, my family still sees a ghostly white cat hanging around the property. The house was eventually torn down, but my cousins, they all report seeing black figures in wheelchairs in the middle of the woods. I'm originally from California. My entire family lives in Los Angeles. However, when I was 2 years old, we moved to a small town in Texas. Although some of my father's siblings moved with us due to better job opportunities, we still made frequent visits and often spent a majority of our summers on the West Coast. It was an adventure every time we went down to visit. However, some of the most bizarre experiences in my young adult life are from those summers in Cali. One summer, when I was either 11 or 12, me and all my cousins spent most of our days outside my grandmother's house, She lived next to an apartment complex. Being bored was always the beginning of many great adventures. On this particular afternoon, me and my cousins decided to play Charmed. It was a bunch of us girl cousins that played witches with powers, and our boy cousins would be the demons. It sounds silly, but it was like tag, but in teams and with make-believe powers. As we played, we saw a little girl up above looking at us. She had short, blonde, curly hair and was in a nightgown. She stared at us with this uneasy grin and what I can only describe as a loud stare. She stood near a rail on the 3rd floor. I got uncomfortable and broke eye contact. All my cousins were just gazing up at her, almost mesmerized. For some reason it felt wrong, so I yelled out, "Hey!" My cousins all looked at me. I knew then that something was wrong because no one spoke or reacted. When we turned around, the girl was on the 2nd floor, closer to us. Me and my older cousin shared a look of despair. We knew something was off. At that moment, we didn't question how she moved so quickly. We didn't want to scare the kids. She still had the same stare and look on her face, and without breaking her grin, she asked if she could play with us. Me and my older cousin told her no, and we both, for some rude reason, cursed her out. Immediately after we cursed her out, we had a blackout. Now, blackouts are common in Los Angeles. It wasn't the first time we'd experienced one, but what happened next was unexplainable. When we looked back, the young girl was walking on the utility pole electric wire. We could see her squatted over, almost like an owl, and she stared at us and continued to stand up and walk away. We all ran inside, and shortly after, the lights came back on. We never saw that little girl again. My grandmother had several friends who lived in that apartment complex, and no one knew who or from which apartment she came. She simply was never seen again. I've grown up in the same house ever since birth. As a little child, my childhood was like any other. On my 5th birthday night, as I was getting tucked into bed, my parents strictly told me to never leave my room after 3 a.m. I never really woke up in the middle of the night, so I had no problem with it and simply thought it was normal. A couple of years later, when I was 13, I randomly started thinking about it and decided to ask my parents about it. They were smiling and having fun making lunch, but as I asked, why can't I leave my room after 3 a.m., their faces turned pale and serious. They then got nervous and simply said, "Don't worry about it, you're too young." I didn't want to be a brat, so I turned around and went back to my room. That night I woke up to a loud crash in the living room. My parents had gone to see my grandparents, so I guess they stayed the night too. I shook as I heard large footsteps in the living room, walking around, but I thought it could have been my brother. I turned the knob and walked out of my room, forgetting it was 3:17. I slithered out of the hall into the kitchen to get a glass of water. As I walked back to my room, I saw some sort of creature standing in the kitchen behind me. I was so horrified, I dropped my glass and couldn't move. It had blood dripping from its bones. It seemed deformed. I squinted, trying to see more of what it looked like, but then it tilted its head and grinned so wide. So wide. It wasn't even physically possible for a human to do that. It got on all fours and crawled towards me. I bolted into my room and locked the door. I grabbed my cat and ran into the bathroom and locked that door. A few minutes passed and the door to my room broke open. Now there was a banging on the bathroom door. I shook in fear, wondering what would happen if it broke the door and got me. But then the banging stopped. I heard a window break. Then what sounded like the front door close. I'm now 16 and I never leave my room after 3 a.m. In fact, I never leave my room until I see sunlight. If you're ever in Los Lunas, New Mexico, take my advice. Never leave your room after 3 a.m., no matter where you are. And if you do, be prepared to run.